I stared at the email notification that had just pinged on my phone. The words blurred slightly as I blinked back tears. Reservation confirmed, Bellini's at 7 p.m. for 2. How appropriate. A reservation for 2 on our 5-year anniversary, only the 2 wouldn't include me. I placed my phone face down on my desk, the sleek glass reflecting the dim light of my corner office. An office that had been my sanctuary for the past 6 months since Nathan moved out. Ms. Chen? The executive team is assembled in the conference room. My assistant Diane stood at the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. She was one of the few people who knew about my personal situation, though even she didn't know the full story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Thank you, Diane. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. I needed a moment to compose myself, to push down the emotions that threatened to crack my professional veneer. I turned to the floor-to-ceiling, windows of my 42nd floor office, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. The view never failed to ground me, to remind me of how far I'd come. At 34, I was now the CEO of Hartwick International, one of the fastest-growing tech conglomerates in the Midwest. My appointment had been kept under wraps for strategic reasons. A restructuring was underway, and the board wanted to announce it with maximum impact next week. Only a handful of executives knew about my new position. My husband, Nathan, was not one of them. Nathan, who had walked out of our marriage claiming he needed space to find himself. Nathan, who had taken that space and apparently found someone else. Nathan, who still thought I was struggling to find my footing after being unfairly passed over for a promotion at Reynolds Tech, my previous employer. The irony was exquisite. While he believed I was licking my wounds from career disappointment, I had been headhunted for the CEO position at Hartwick, the very company he had just accepted a VP of marketing position at 3 weeks ago. He had no idea that his new boss was his estranged wife. I smoothed down my Armani suit, checked my reflection in the small mirror I kept in my desk drawer, and straightened my shoulders. Now was not the time for personal matters. I had a company to run. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The conference room fell silent as I entered. 8 pairs of eyes watched me take my position at the head of the table. The executive team respected me, some grudgingly at first, others immediately, but all of them had come to recognize my leadership in the short time I'd been here. Good morning, everyone. Let's begin with the quarterly projections. The meeting progressed smoothly. Marketing reports, financial forecasts, development timelines. We moved through the agenda with practiced efficiency. When we reached the item about the upcoming merger with Astoria Digital, the company Nathan had been pulled from, I felt a twist in my stomach. The Astoria integration team arrives tomorrow, said Howard, our COO. Their marketing division will need to be fully briefed on our brand standards and upcoming campaigns. I nodded. And who's heading up that transition from our side? Nathan Davies, the new VP of Marketing, replied Howard. He's been at Astoria for 5 years, so he knows their operations inside and out. Should make for a smooth transition. 5 years. Exactly the length of our marriage. I had met Nathan when Hartwick was considering an acquisition of the small tech firm I worked for at the time. He had been the charming, ambitious marketing director who had wined and dined me, professionally at first, then personally after the acquisition fell through and there was no conflict of interest. Excellent, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'll want a meeting with Mr. Davies first thing tomorrow morning. Let's schedule it for 8 a.m. Howard looked surprised. You want to meet with a VP directly? That's unusual for this stage of the integration. I met his gaze levelly. This acquisition is crucial to our Q3 objectives. I want to be certain that marketing alignment is seamless. Any concerns? No, not at all, Howard backpedaled. I'll set it up. Thank you. Now, regarding the AI initiative, the meeting continued, but my mind kept drifting to tomorrow's encounter. Nathan had no idea what was coming. He believed he was joining Hartwick under CEO Richard Hartwick, the founder's son who had stepped down 3 months ago after a heart attack scare. The announcement of my appointment had been delayed to coincide with the quarterly earnings report and the Astoria acquisition announcement. By the time the executive meeting concluded, I had regained my equilibrium. This was business, not personal. Tomorrow would be challenging, but I hadn't risen to this position by allowing emotions to cloud my judgment. As the executives filed out, Miranda Wilson, our chief legal officer, lingered behind. "Eliza, do you have a moment?" she asked once we were alone. "Of course, Miranda. What's on your mind?" She hesitated, which was unusual for her. Miranda was known for her directness. "I've just been reviewing the personnel files for the Astoria transition team. I noticed something that might be complicated." My heart rate picked up, but my expression remained neutral. "Go on." "Nathan Davies. He's your husband, isn't he?" I hadn't changed my legal name after marriage, remaining Eliza Chen professionally, so the connection wasn't immediately obvious from paperwork alone. But Miranda and I had worked together years ago at Reynolds Tech, before either of us came. "To Hartwick. Estranged husband," I corrected. "We're separated." Miranda nodded, her expression guarded. "Does he know about your position here?" "No," I admitted. "Our personal communication has been minimal since the separation. He's aware I left Reynolds, but not where I went. This creates a potential conflict of interest situation. The board should be informed." "I agree," I said, surprising her. "I've already drafted a memo detailing the situation and the steps I'll take to ensure there's no impropriety. Howard will oversee all performance reviews and compensation decisions regarding Nathan, and I'll recuse myself from direct management of his department as much as practical." Miranda looked impressed. "You've thought this through." "I don't allow personal matters to interfere with business," I replied. It was the mantra I'd lived by for the past 6 months. "Fair enough. But Eliza?" Her voice softened slightly. "Tomorrow's meeting will be challenging. Are you prepared for that?" Was I prepared to face the man who had walked out on our marriage, claiming he needed freedom, only to apparently find it in someone else's arms? The man who had dismissed my career ambitions as unrealistic and had suggested I aim for something more achievable? "Completely prepared," I said, with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "This is business, Miranda. Nothing more." After she left, I turned back to the window, watching clouds gather on the horizon. A storm was coming, both literally and figuratively. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Nathan. Can we talk? Important news to share." 5 months of minimal contact. And now he wanted to talk on our anniversary. The timing couldn't be more pointed if he'd planned it. I typed a response, deleted it, then typed again. "In meetings all day. Tomorrow?" His reply came quickly. "Tomorrow works. Lunch?" "I start a new position at Hartwick International tomorrow." "Morning." A bitter smile curved my lips. "Congratulations on the new position. Can't do lunch. Dinner? Perfect. 7 p.m. at Bellini's? I've already made a reservation. The same reservation I'd seen confirmed earlier. He hadn't changed it from his plans with whoever he was seeing now, just added me to the equation. "See you then," I replied, then put my phone away. Tomorrow would bring a professional reunion in the morning and a personal one in the evening. Both promised to be memorable, though not in ways Nathan would expect. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 6:30 a.m., 2.5 hours before my scheduled meeting with Nathan. I wanted to review his file one more time and prepare mentally for our encounter. His resume was impressive. That was undeniable. Nathan had climbed quickly at Astoria, turning their marketing department into a force that had helped the smaller company punch above its weight. His campaigns were innovative, his team management stellar according to performance reviews. On paper, he was exactly the kind of executive Hartwick needed during this transition. Had our marriage received performance reviews, they wouldn't have been as glowing. Nathan had been charming, ambitious, and attentive, until he wasn't. The change had been gradual, then sudden, like a slow-moving landslide that finally gives way. Late nights at the office became weekends away for conferences. Conversations about our future became monologues about his career trajectory. And my own. Career ambitions were treated as cute distractions from what should have been my primary focus, supporting his success. "You're talented, Eliza," he'd said during our last major argument. "But let's be realistic about which one of us is on a leadership track." The memory still stung, but now it also fueled a small, vindictive flame of anticipation. At 7:45, Diane brought me coffee and a small folder. "Your 8 a.m. appointment will be arriving soon," she said, placing both on my desk. "Is there anything else you need?" "No, thank you, Diane. Please show Mr. Davies in as soon as he arrives." She hesitated, her hand lingering on the folder. "Ms. Chen, there's something you should know. Mr. Davies called up to confirm his appointment, and he mentioned he's bringing someone with him. A Ms. Rebecca Winters, Astoria's PR director. My fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around my coffee cup. Rebecca Winters. The name was vaguely familiar from the acquisition documents. Did he say why? He said they've been working closely on the transition and thought it would be efficient to meet together. Working closely. Of course they had. "That's fine," I said, my voice betraying none of my sudden suspicion. "Thank you for letting me know." Diane nodded and left, closing the door quietly behind her. Rebecca Winters. I quickly pulled up her file on my tablet. 31 years old, impressive credentials from Northwestern, rapid advancement at Astoria. Her photo showed a woman with sleek blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and the kind of polished smile that belonged on a corporate brochure. She was beautiful, in that conventional way that had always made me feel slightly inadequate with my more understated looks. Was she the reason for Nathan's reservation for two on our anniversary? The thought landed like a stone in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. Speculation wouldn't serve me now. I needed focus. At precisely 8 a.m., my office. Phone buzzed. "Ms. Chen, Mr. Davies and Ms. Winters are here to see you." "Send them in, please." I stood, moving to the front of my desk rather than remaining seated behind it. Body language was important for first impressions, and this was, technically, a first impression in our new professional relationship. The door opened, and Nathan stepped through, his confident smile exactly as I remembered it. He was in mid-sentence, speaking over his shoulder to the woman behind him. "Going to be impressed with what we've put together, I promise you that." His words died as he turned and saw me. The color drained from his face, his mouth falling open in shock. "Hello, Nathan," I said, my voice perfectly professional. "It's been a while." Behind him, Rebecca Winters looked confused, glancing between us as the tension suddenly electrified the air. "Eliza?" Nathan finally managed. How are you?" "Eliza Chen," I said, extending my hand professionally as though we were meeting for the first time. "CEO of Hartwick International. Welcome to our team." His hand moved automatically to shake mine, his palm clammy against my cool, dry skin. The touch, our first in 5 months, sent an unwelcome current through me that I immediately suppressed. "CEO?" he repeated, his voice hoarse. "But Richard Hartwick stepped down 3 months ago due to health concerns," I finished for him. "The board appointed me as his successor. The public announcement will accompany next week's quarterly report and acquisition news." Rebecca stepped forward, professional, enough to recover from the awkward moment. "Ms. Chen, I'm Rebecca Winters, PR director from Astoria. It's a pleasure to meet you." Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. She had no idea who I was to Nathan. Interesting. Likewise, Ms. Winters. Please, both of you, have a seat. I gestured to the chairs in front of my desk, then moved back to my own seat. Nathan sank into his chair like a man in a trance, while Rebecca sat with perfect posture, opening her portfolio with efficient movements. I understand you've both been instrumental in preparing for this transition, I began, my voice steady and professional. Rebecca nodded, launching into a well-prepared overview of their integration strategy. While she spoke, I observed Nathan, who seemed to be struggling to process this new reality. His eyes kept darting around my office, taking in the trappings of executive leadership, the awards on the wall, the view of the city, the subtle but unmistakable indicators of power. When Rebecca finished her overview, I asked a few pointed questions about market positioning and brand alignment. She answered competently, while Nathan remained uncharacteristically silent. "And the marketing team transition, Mr. Davies," I said, finally forcing him to engage. "How do you envision that unfolding in the first 30 days? Nathan cleared his throat, visibly pulling himself together. Whatever else he might be, he was a consummate professional when it came to his work. "We've developed a 3-phase integration plan," he began, his voice growing stronger as he moved into familiar territory. "Initial assessment and team alignment, followed by strategy harmonization, culminating in a unified campaign launch for Q4. He walked me through the details, gradually regaining his confidence. This was the Nathan I remembered, articulate, strategic, passionate about his work. He'd always been good at his job. That had never been our problem. "Your plan is comprehensive," I acknowledged when he finished. "I especially appreciate the attention to cultural integration between the teams. That's often overlooked in these situations." A flicker of surprise crossed his face at my praise. Then again, he'd never really respected my business acumen, so perhaps any professional assessment from me was surprising to him. "There is one element I'd like to see expanded," I continued. "The customer retention strategy during the transition seems minimal. In my experience, acquisitions often lead to a 5 to 10% customer attrition rate if not proactively managed." Nathan and Rebecca exchanged glances. "We hadn't anticipated significant attrition," Nathan admitted. "Astoria's customer base is quite loyal." "Loyalty follows value and consistency," I replied. "When either appears threatened by change, customers get nervous. I'd like to see a robust retention plan on my desk by the end of the week." "Of course," Rebecca said quickly. "We'll prioritize that." "Excellent." I glanced at my watch. "I have another meeting shortly, but I wanted to personally welcome you both to Hartwick. Ms. Winters, Howard Miller, our COO, would like to meet with you about the press release strategy. His assistant will reach out to schedule that today." Rebecca nodded, gathering her materials. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Chen. I look forward to working with you." "Likewise." I turned to Nathan. "Mr. Davies, please stay a moment. There are a few additional matters we should discuss." Rebecca gave Nathan a quick, questioning look, but he nodded slightly, and she took her cue to leave. Once the door closed behind her, silence descended on the office. Nathan stared at me, still looking shell-shocked. "CEO?" he finally said. "You're the CEO of Hartwick International." "Yes." "And you didn't think to mention this minor detail when I told you I was taking a position here?" The audacity almost made me laugh. "Our communication has been limited to logistics about selling the condo and dividing assets. My career advancement didn't seem relevant to those discussions." His jaw tightened. "This is a hell of a coincidence. Eliza." "No coincidence," I corrected him. "I was appointed 3 months ago. You accepted this position 3 weeks ago. The timing was determined by business needs, not personal history." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing, but now recognized as his tell for feeling outmaneuvered. "So, what happens now? This is obviously a conflict of interest." "The board has been informed of our personal connection," I said. "Appropriate management structures have been put in place. Howard will oversee your department directly for performance reviews and compensation decisions. As long as we maintain professional boundaries, there's no reason this should impact either of our careers. Professional boundaries, he repeated, a hint of bitterness creeping into his tone. Seems a bit late for that discussion. I kept my expression neutral, refusing to be baited into the personal conversation he seemed to be angling for. Is there a problem with the arrangement, Mr. Davies? If you feel you cannot work effectively under these conditions, now would be the time to say so. The formal address, Mr. Davies, seemed to finally drive home the new dynamic between us. His expression shifted, the personal grievance retreating behind a professional mask. No problem, he said stiffly. I can be professional if you can. Good. Then I'll see you at the department heads meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Howard will brief you on the details. I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. Welcome to Hartwick. He stood as well, hesitating as though there was more he wanted to say. After a moment, he simply nodded and turned to leave. Nathan, I called just as he reached the door. He paused, looking back at me. Is our dinner still on for tonight? Something complicated flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Yes, he said after a moment. 7 p.m. at Bellini's. I'll be there. After he left, I sank back into my chair, exhaling slowly. The encounter had gone largely as expected, though the presence of Rebecca Winters was an unwelcome variable. Were they involved romantically? The thought shouldered its way forward, despite my attempts to dismiss it as irrelevant. I had more important matters to focus on: a company to run, an acquisition to manage, a career trajectory that had finally outpaced Nathan's wildest dreams. For himself, let alone for me. His reaction to my position had been satisfying, I had to admit. The shock, the disbelief, followed by the dawning realization that his estranged wife was now his superior in the very arena where he had always assumed primacy. But dinner tonight would be the real test. Nathan had news to share, news important enough to reach out after months of minimal contact, news he wanted to deliver on our anniversary. I had a strong suspicion about what that news might be, and who it might involve. I picked up my phone and dialed Miranda's extension. Miranda Wilson's office, her assistant answered. This is Eliza Chen. Is she available? A moment later, Miranda came on the line. How did it go? She asked without preamble. Professionally adequate. Personally complicated, I admitted. There's a complication I didn't anticipate. Are you free for lunch? I could use your advice. I'll bring salads to your office at noon, Miranda offered. Legal is swamped with the acquisition paperwork today. Perfect. Thank you. I hung up and turned to my computer, forcing myself to focus on the quarterly reports that needed my review. The morning crawled by, each minute ticking closer to both my lunch with Miranda and my dinner with Nathan, two conversations that would shape the path forward through this unexpected intersection of my personal and professional lives. By the time Miranda arrived with our lunch, I had managed to lose myself in work for a few hours, the rhythm of analysis and decision-making providing a welcome distraction from thoughts of Nathan and Rebecca. Caesar salad with grilled chicken, light on the dressing, Miranda announced, placing the container in front of me. Now tell me about this complication. I filled her in on the meeting, including Rebecca's presence and my suspicions about her relationship with Nathan. And he wants to meet for dinner tonight, on what would have been our 5th anniversary, I concluded. To share important news. Miranda speared a piece of lettuce thoughtfully. You think he's going to tell you he's seeing someone new? Settor. Timing suggests it, and if that someone is Rebecca Winters, that complicates the professional dynamic significantly. Miranda finished for me. Have you considered canceling the dinner? I shook my head. I need to know where things stand. If they are involved, we need to address it head-on from a company perspective. There are additional conflict of interest concerns if 2 members of the same transition team are romantically involved. Agreed. Miranda studied me for a moment. And personally? Are you prepared for that conversation? I pushed my salad around with my fork. I thought I was past the point where Nathan could hurt me, I admitted. But seeing him today, I don't know. There's still something there. Not love exactly, but history, Miranda supplied. 5 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight, no matter how it ended. Exactly. I looked up at her. How do I keep this professional when it feels so personal? Miranda set down her fork. You compartmentalize. In this building, he's Nathan Davies, VP of Marketing. At dinner tonight, he's Nathan, your soon-to-be ex-husband. Don't let the two versions bleed into each other. And if they're involved, Nathan and Rebecca, then you acknowledge it, establish clear professional boundaries with both of them, and move forward. Your personal feelings about their relationship are irrelevant to the company's operations. Keep that line bright and clear. Her advice was pragmatic, as always. Miranda had been through a divorce herself a few years back and had navigated it with the same precision she brought to legal contracts. Thank you, I said sincerely. I needed that perspective. Anytime. She gathered her empty container. And Eliza? For what it's worth, I think you handled this morning's meeting perfectly. Keep that same energy tonight. After she left, I finished my workday with reasonable focus, though the thought of dinner loomed larger as the hours passed. At 5:30, I decided to call it a day, heading to the executive washroom with the small overnight bag I'd brought. The woman who emerged 45 minutes later barely resembled the CEO who had run meetings all day. I had changed into a deep burgundy dress that hugged my curves without being overt, paired with the diamond earrings Nathan had given me for our first anniversary. My hair, normally pulled back in a sleek bun, now fell in soft waves around my shoulders. The transformation wasn't for Nathan's benefit. It was armor, a reminder to myself that I was more than my professional identity, more than the woman he had walked away from. Bellini's was only a few blocks from Hartwick Tower, but I took a car service to avoid the March wind messing up my carefully styled hair. As we pulled up to the upscale Italian restaurant, I felt a flutter of nerves in my stomach. This was ridiculous. I had faced down boardrooms full of skeptical executives and come out victorious. One dinner with my estranged husband shouldn't rattle me, but it did. The maitre d' greeted me with a practiced smile. Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation? I'm joining Nathan Davies, I replied. The reservation should be for 7 p.m. Ah, yes. Mr. Davies has already arrived with his guest. Please follow me. Guest? My stride faltered slightly before I caught myself. So Nathan had kept his original plans after all. Dinner with me had simply been added to his evening, not substituted for whatever he had planned before. The maitre d' led me through the dimly lit restaurant, past tables of couples and business associates sharing expensive meals and conversation. Near the back, at a table with a perfect view of the Chicago River through the floor-to-ceiling windows, sat Nathan. Across from him was Rebecca Winters. They were leaning toward each other, engaged in conversation that seemed to require such proximity. Nathan's hand covered hers on the table, his thumb stroking her knuckles in a gesture of intimacy I recognized all too well. Neither noticed my approach until the maitre d' cleared his throat. Mr. Davies, your other guest has arrived. Nathan looked up, his expression shifting rapidly from intimate affection to deer-in-headlights shock. He dropped Rebecca's hand and stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his water glass. Eliza, you made it. Rebecca turned, her own expression reflecting confusion before smoothing into professional pleasantness. Ms. Chen, hello again. Smiled, the expression not reaching my eyes. Ms. Winters, I didn't realize you would be joining us this evening. Nathan cleared his throat, gesturing to the empty chair. Please sit down. I wanted you both here for this conversation. As I took my seat, the waiter appeared with a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket. "The Dom Perignon you ordered, sir," he announced, presenting the bottle with a flourish. "Perfect timing," Nathan said, though his tight smile suggested otherwise. "Please, go ahead and pour." As the waiter filled 3 flutes with the expensive champagne. I studied Nathan's face, reading the discomfort there. Whatever he had planned for this evening, my arrival had disrupted it, or at least complicated it. When the waiter departed, Nathan raised his glass. "A toast," he said, his voice not quite steady. "To new beginnings and," he faltered, glancing between Rebecca and me, "honesty." Rebecca smiled, lifting her glass, while I merely raised mine without comment. The champagne was excellent, but it tasted bitter on my tongue. "So," I said, setting down my glass, "you mentioned you had news to share." Nathan and Rebecca exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. It was Rebecca who spoke first. "Nathan wanted us both here because, well, our news affects both the personal and professional spheres." "I see," I said, though I didn't entirely. What news could be so important that it required both his estranged wife and his apparent new girlfriend to hear simultaneously? Nathan took a deep breath. "Eliza, Rebecca and I have been seeing each other for the past 4 months. The timeline hit me like a slap. 4 months. We had separated 5 months ago. That meant either Nathan had moved on with astonishing speed, or, the more likely scenario, their relationship had begun before our separation. I kept my expression neutral, years of boardroom negotiations serving me well in this moment. "I gathered as much," I said evenly. "Congratulations." Nathan looked taken aback by my calm response. "Thank you," he said cautiously. "But that's not all of it." Rebecca reached for his hand, giving it a squeeze of encouragement. The gesture made something twist painfully in my chest, but I ignored it. "We're engaged," Nathan continued. "We're getting married in June." The words hung in the air between us. Engaged. After 5 months of separation, 4 months of dating someone new, my husband was already planning another wedding. And he had chosen our anniversary to tell me. "I see," I said again, because what else could I say? "That is significant news." Rebecca was watching me carefully, perhaps expecting tears or anger. I gave her neither satisfaction. "We wanted to tell you professionally as well," she added. "Given the new circumstances with you as CEO, we wanted to be transparent about our relationship to avoid any appearance of impropriety. So they had planned to tell me about their engagement tonight, but in their scenario, I was still the struggling ex-wife who had been passed over for promotion, not the CEO who would be signing their paychecks." The irony was almost too perfect. "I appreciate your transparency," I said, my CEO voice firmly in place. "As I mentioned to Nathan this morning, Hartwick has protocols for these situations. You'll both need to disclose your relationship to HR, of course." Nathan was staring at me, clearly thrown by my businesslike response. "That's it? You're not upset?" I met his gaze steadily. "Would you prefer that I make a scene, Nathan? We've been separated for 5 months. Your personal life is your own now." He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "No, of course not. I just thought, given the timing—" "The anniversary," I acknowledged with a slight nod. "An interesting choice for this conversation." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly. "Anniversary? I don't understand," I smiled thinly. "Today would have been our 5th wedding anniversary. Didn't Nathan mention that when he made the reservation?" The color drained from Rebecca's face as she turned to Nathan. "You said this date was significant because of the acquisition timeline." Nathan's expression turned pained. "Becca, I didn't think it mattered." "It matters," she cut him off, her voice tight. "It matters very much that you chose your wedding anniversary to introduce me to your wife, to tell her about our engagement." The tension at the table had shifted, no longer between Nathan and me, but between Nathan and Rebecca. I felt a small, vindictive satisfaction at the crack in their united front. "Perhaps we should order," I suggested mildly, picking up my menu. "The sea bass here is excellent." The waiter's timely return provided a momentary reprieve from the uncomfortable conversation. We placed our orders in strained silence, the celebratory mood Nathan had clearly planned now thoroughly deflated. When the waiter departed, Rebecca excused herself to the restroom, leaving Nathan and me alone for the first time since our morning meeting. "You could have warned me," he said quietly, an edge of accusation in his voice. About being CEO. About the fact that I'd be working for my soon-to-be ex-wife. I raised an eyebrow. "And you could have warned me that you were bringing your fiancé to our anniversary dinner. I suppose we both have room for improvement in our communication." He had the decency to look chagrined. "I didn't plan it this way. When you suggested dinner, I thought it would be easier to have this conversation once with both of you." I didn't connect the date. "Didn't you?" I challenged softly. "Nathan, in 5 years of marriage, you never once forgot our anniversary. Your calendar has always been meticulously maintained. You expect me to believe this was an oversight?" He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I've been distracted lately." Clearly. I took another sip of champagne. June is ambitious for a wedding. The divorce won't even be final until May, assuming everything proceeds smoothly. "I'm aware of the timeline," he said stiffly. I studied him across the table. This man I had loved, had built a life with, had envisioned a future alongside. There was still a magnetism to him, a charisma that had drawn me in from our first meeting. But now I could also see the selfishness, the calculation behind his charm. "Does she know?" I asked. "Know what?" "That you were still sending me texts about working on our marriage a month after you started seeing her." His expression hardened. "That's not fair, Eliza. I was confused, trying to figure things out." "And now you have it all figured out," I concluded. "Congratulations on your clarity." Rebecca returned to the table, her professional mask back in place, though her eyes were cooler when they met Nathan's. The conversation shifted to safer topics: the weather, the restaurant's renowned chef, the upcoming acquisition announcement. We performed the dance of civility with practiced steps, 3 professionals who understood the value of appearances. When the main courses arrived, Nathan steered the conversation back to business. "So, Eliza, any insights you can share about the direction you plan to take Hartwick? As VP of Marketing, I should align my strategy with your vision." It was a transparent attempt to assert his professional value, to remind me that regardless of our personal history, he was an asset to Hartwick. I decided to allow him that much. "Hartwick is poised for significant expansion in the Asian markets," I replied. "The acquisition of Astoria is just the first step in a larger strategy to position us as a global leader in integrated tech solutions." Rebecca leaned forward slightly. "That aligns perfectly with the campaign framework we've been developing. Astoria has strong connections in Singapore and Malaysia that Hartwick could leverage." "I'd be interested in seeing that framework," I said, genuinely curious despite the circumstances. "Perhaps you could present it at next week's strategy session." The conversation continued in this vein, professional, productive, bizarrely normal given the personal undercurrents. By the time dessert arrived, we had outlined several promising marketing approaches for the merged company. As we finished our tiramisu, Nathan excused himself to take a call, leaving Rebecca and me alone. She wasted no time once he was out of earshot. "I want you to know that I didn't know about you and Nathan when we first got involved," she said, her voice low but firm. "He told me his marriage was over, that you had both agreed to move on." "Did he?" I kept my tone neutral. "Interesting?" "When did I find out the truth?" "About 2 months ago." "By then—" She shrugged, twisting the modest diamond ring on her finger. "By then, I was already in love with him." I studied her face, recognizing the sincerity there. A word of advice, Ms. Winters. Nathan has a fluid relationship with the truth when it serves his purposes. Remember that. She stiffened slightly. With all due respect, Ms. Chen, you don't know the Nathan I know. A sad smile touched my lips. No, Ms. Winters. You don't know the Nathan I know. I left the statement hanging between us, pregnant with 5 years of history that Rebecca couldn't possibly understand. Before she could respond, Nathan returned to the table, tucking his phone into his jacket pocket. He glanced between us, clearly trying to read the tension in the air. Everything. Okay? He asked, his voice carefully casual. Just getting better acquainted, I replied, reaching for my water glass. Ms. Winters was sharing some insights about your relationship. Nathan's smile faltered slightly. Great. Well, shall we get the check? It's getting late. As if on cue, the waiter appeared with the bill. Nathan reached for it automatically, but I was quicker. Please, allow me, I said, sliding my corporate card into the leather folder. Consider it a belated engagement gift. The flash of discomfort on his face was worth every penny of the expensive meal. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably, and he was still struggling to adjust. Outside the restaurant, the March wind had picked up, sending Rebecca's blonde hair flying around her face. Nathan placed a protective arm around her shoulders as they prepared to say goodnight. Well, this has been... He hesitated, clearly searching for an appropriate word. Enlightening, I supplied. For all of us, I think. Rebecca nodded stiffly. We appreciate your understanding, Ms. Chen. Professionally speaking, I assure you our relationship won't interfere with our work during the transition. I'm sure it won't, I replied. Hartwick values both of your talents. We'll navigate this situation appropriately. My car arrived, the driver pulling smoothly to the curb. Nathan stepped forward, opening the door for me in a gesture that felt like muscle. Memory from our marriage. Good night, Eliza, he said softly. I'll see you tomorrow at the department heads meeting. Mr. Davies, Ms. Winters, I nodded professionally. Have a pleasant evening. As the car pulled away, I caught a glimpse of them in the side mirror. Nathan's head bent close to Rebecca's, their body language suggesting an intense conversation. No doubt discussing their CEO's unexpected identity and what it meant for their future. I leaned back against the leather seat, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of the evening. Engaged. Nathan was engaged to a woman he'd been seeing for 4 months, planning a wedding that would take place mere weeks after our divorce was finalized. The timeline was almost comically accelerated, as though he couldn't wait to replace the life we'd built together. And now we would be working together daily, with his fiancée just down the hall. My phone buzzed with a text from Miranda. How did it go? I stared at the screen, considering my response. Finally, I typed, They're engaged. Wedding in June. She's the PR director from Astoria. Miranda's reply came immediately. Holy shit, you okay? Professional boundaries intact, personal ones demolished. But I'll be fine. Wine at my place tomorrow? You can tell me everything. I smiled slightly. Absolutely. Need it. The car arrived at my building, a sleek high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan. The doorman greeted me by name as I entered the lobby, taking the elevator to my penthouse on the 32nd floor. I'd purchased it 3 months ago when I accepted the CEO position, leaving behind the condo Nathan and I had shared. The new space was entirely mine, decorated to my taste, free from memories, a fresh start. I kicked off my heels as I entered, padding across the hardwood floors to pour myself a glass of scotch. Taking it to the floor-to-ceiling windows, I gazed out at the city lights reflecting off the dark surface of the lake. The view never failed to center me, to remind me of how far I'd come. Nathan's engagement stung. I couldn't deny that. But the pain wasn't about losing him. That grief had been processed months ago. It was about the replacement, the ease with which he had moved on while I had poured myself into my career. It was about the calculated cruelty of telling me on our anniversary. My phone rang, the screen lighting up with Nathan's name. I stared at it for a moment, debating whether to answer. Professional boundaries, I reminded myself. But it was nearly 11. This wasn't a professional call. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text appeared. "We need to talk about today, about everything." I typed back, "Nothing to discuss. See you at the meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. His response was immediate. "This isn't about work. Please, Eliza." I drained my scotch, setting the glass down with a decisive clink. Professional communications only. From now on. Good night, Nathan. Turning off my phone, I headed to the bathroom to wash away the remnants of the day. As the hot water sluiced over me, I made a decision. Nathan Davies and Rebecca Winters would receive the same treatment as any other executives at Hartwick. Professional respect, clear expectations, and absolutely no special consideration. The personal history was irrelevant. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I would face it as Eliza Chen, CEO, not as Nathan's estranged wife. The department heads meeting was scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. sharp in the main conference room on the executive floor. I arrived at 8:45, wanting to be settled and in control of the space before the others arrived. Howard was already there, reviewing his presentation notes. "Morning, Eliza," he greeted me. "Ready for the full team introduction?" "Absolutely," I replied, setting up my laptop at the head of the table. "Any concerns about the Astoria transition team integration?" Howard hesitated. "Nothing specific, but there's been some chatter about the new VP of marketing. Apparently he made quite an impression yesterday, bringing that PR director with him to meetings she wasn't scheduled for. So Nathan was already bending protocols. Interesting. Ms. Winters has valuable insights about Astoria's brand positioning," I said neutrally. "But you're right. We should maintain proper channels during the transition. I'll address it." Howard nodded, returning to his notes. I pulled up the meeting agenda, making a small adjustment to ensure that Nathan's marketing update would come last. A petty move, perhaps, but it would establish the pecking order clearly for everyone present. The conference room began to fill with department heads, some familiar faces from my 3 months at Hartwick, others new arrivals from Astoria. Nathan and Rebecca entered together, deep in conversation. They paused when they saw me, Rebecca immediately adopting her professional demeanor while Nathan's expression remained guarded. "Good morning, Ms. Chen," Rebecca greeted me formally. "I hope we're not late." "Right on time, Ms. Winters," I replied, "though I don't believe you're on the distribution list for the department heads meeting." Her smile faltered slightly. "Nathan, Mr. Davies, thought my input would be valuable for the marketing discussion." "I'm sure it would be," I agreed. "But we have protocols for these meetings. Department heads only for this session, with team members joining for specific agenda items when invited. Perhaps Mr. Davies can brief you afterward." Nathan stepped forward. "Eliza, Ms. Chen, I thought given yesterday's discussion about brand alignment, the agenda has been distributed." "Mr. Davies," I interrupted smoothly, "if you'd like to propose changes to the standard meeting structure, please submit them through proper channels for future consideration." The professional rebuke landed exactly as intended. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Of course. My mistake." Rebecca touched his arm lightly. "I'll catch up with you after," she said quietly, then exited the room with perfect composure. As the remaining seats filled, I called the meeting to order precisely at 9 a.m. "Good morning, everyone. Today marks an important milestone as we formally welcome our new colleagues from Astoria Digital. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment for introductions around the table." We proceeded through the agenda efficiently. Operations updates, financial projections, IT integration timelines. I noticed Nathan taking detailed notes, his focus intense. Despite our personal complications, I had to admit he was engaged and professional during the meeting, asking thoughtful questions and offering valuable insights when appropriate. When we reached the marketing update, I nodded to him. "Mr. Davies, I believe this is your segment." Nathan stood, moving to the presentation screen with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding a room. "Thank you, Ms. Chen. I've prepared an overview of our integrated marketing approach for the next quarter." His presentation was impeccable, clear, strategic, and forward-thinking. He highlighted Astoria's strengths while acknowledging Hartwick's established brand dominance, proposing a phased integration that would preserve customer loyalty while expanding market reach. As he concluded, several department heads nodded appreciatively. I had to acknowledge that Hartwick had gained a valuable asset in Nathan, regardless of our personal history. "Thank you, Mr. Davies," I said when he finished. "Your approach aligns well with our expansion goals. I would like to see more emphasis on the Asian markets in the next iteration, as we discussed yesterday." "Already incorporating those elements," he replied. "I'll have a revised plan by Friday." The meeting wrapped up on schedule, with action items assigned and follow-up meetings calendared. As the department heads filed out, Nathan lingered, clearly, waiting to speak with me privately. Howard caught my eye, silently asking if I wanted him to stay. I shook my head slightly. I could handle Nathan. When the room had emptied except for us, Nathan approached my end of the table. "That was professional," he said. "Did you expect something else?" I gathered my materials, keeping my movements unhurried. "No, He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This is weird, Eliza. You have to admit that." "It's unusual," I conceded. "But not unmanageable if we maintain appropriate boundaries." "Like sending Rebecca away from the meeting?" I met his gaze directly. "That wasn't personal, Nathan. It was procedural. Department heads only. The same rule applies to everyone, if you say so." His tone suggested he didn't entirely believe me. "Is there something specific you need, Mr. Davies? I have another meeting in 15 minutes. The formal address caused a flicker of frustration to cross his face. "Can you drop the Mr. Davies when we're alone? It feels ridiculous after 5 years of marriage." "It establishes necessary distance in a professional context," I replied. "The same way you should address me as Ms. Chen in this building, regardless of our history." He studied me for a long moment. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Being able to call the shots, set the rules?" "This isn't about enjoyment, Nathan. It's about creating a functional working environment despite complicated personal history. If that's challenging for you—" "It's not," he interrupted. "I can be professional. I just thought maybe we could acknowledge the elephant in the room, instead of pretending it doesn't exist." I raised an eyebrow. "Which elephant would that be? Our separation? Your engagement? The fact that you chose our anniversary to announce it?" He at least had the grace to look uncomfortable at the last point. "About that, I really didn't connect the date. It was insensitive." "Yes, it was." I closed my laptop with a decisive click. "Is there anything else? Or can we consider this?" Conversation concluded. "Actually, there is something else." His posture shifted slightly, taking on the subtle confidence I recognized from his negotiation stance. "Rebecca and I want to be upfront about our relationship with the entire executive team. We think transparency is the best approach." I nodded, slowly. "A company-wide disclosure isn't necessary, but informing HR and your direct reports is appropriate. The official record should note that your relationship began prior to joining Hartwick to avoid any suggestion of workplace impropriety." "Prior to joining Hartwick," he repeated, a hint of irritation in his tone. "You make it sound so clinical." "It is clinical, Nathan. It's a disclosure for HR records, not a romance novel." He fell silent for a moment, studying me with an intensity that was uncomfortably familiar. "You really have changed," he finally said. "The Eliza I knew would have been devastated by last night's news." The comment stung more than I wanted to admit. The Eliza you knew was still trying to fit herself into the narrow space you allocated for her, I replied evenly. This version doesn't need your approval or validation. I never tried to limit you, he protested. I supported your career. You supported what you thought my career should be, I corrected him. A complementary backdrop to your own ambitions, never something that might overshadow you. His expression hardened. That's not fair, isn't it? How many times did you tell me I was aiming too high, or should be more realistic about my goals? How often did you redirect conversations about my advancement to focus on your latest accomplishment? I was trying to protect you from disappointment. No, Nathan, I said quietly. You were protecting yourself from the possibility that I might succeed beyond your expectations, beyond your own achievements. And now, here we are. The truth of my words hung between us, sharp and undeniable. Nathan's face went through a rapid succession of emotions: denial, anger, and finally, reluctant recognition. I never thought of it that way, he admitted. I know. That's part of the problem. I checked my watch. I need to go. We can continue this conversation another time if necessary. He nodded stiffly. For what it's worth, I am sorry about last night. The timing, bringing Rebecca without warning, all of it. It was poorly handled. Apology accepted, I said, gathering my materials. And Nathan, your presentation today was excellent. Hartwick is fortunate to have your expertise. The one. Professional acknowledgement seemed to surprise him. Thank you. That means a lot, actually. As I walked past him toward the door, he reached out, his fingers lightly touching my arm. The contact was brief but electric, triggering memories I'd worked hard to compartmentalize. Eliza, he said softly. Are you happy? Really? The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of professional triumph and personal reconstruction. Happiness hadn't been the goal, survival had been, followed by success. I'm fulfilled, I answered honestly. The rest is still evolving. He nodded, accepting the nuanced response. For what it's worth, I think you're going to be amazing at this job. You always did see the bigger picture better than most. The compliment was unexpected, and I suspected, genuine. Thank you. I appreciate that. As I walked to my next meeting, I found myself unsettled by the brief exchange. Nathan's question lingered uncomfortably in my mind. Happiness had seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford during the separation. The career change, the relentless forward momentum that had carried me to Hartwick's executive suite. Perhaps it was time to reconsider what happiness might look like. In this new landscape I'd created, one where I was defined by my own achievements rather than my relationship to Nathan. The thought was interrupted by Miranda catching up to me in the hallway. How was the department heads meeting? She asked, falling into step beside me. Productive, I replied. Nathan gave an impressive presentation. And the personal dynamics? Manageable. Though he tried to bring Rebecca into a meeting she wasn't authorized for. Miranda raised an eyebrow. Testing boundaries already? It appears so. I shut it down professionally. Good. Oh, and I've drafted the formal disclosure document for their relationship. You should review it before they submit it to HR. I nodded my thanks as we reached the conference room for our next meeting. Wine tonight still on? I could use the debriefing session. Absolutely. My place at 8. I'll order Thai. The day progressed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and strategic planning. I managed to avoid further direct interaction with Nathan, though I was acutely aware of his presence in the building. Several times I caught glimpses of him and Rebecca in the halls or cafeteria, their body language suggesting a comfortable intimacy that triggered an unwelcome twinge in my chest. By late afternoon, I was reviewing acquisition documents in my office when Diane buzzed through. Ms. Chen, Rebecca Winters is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but says it's important. I hesitated, contemplating declining the impromptu meeting. Professional boundaries would justify sending her away, but curiosity won out. Send. Her in, please. Rebecca entered with perfect posture and a determined expression. Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Chen. I apologize for the interruption. What can I do for you, Ms. Winters? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. I wanted to speak with you directly about this morning's meeting. I understand why you asked me to leave, and you were right. Protocol is important during a transition. I appreciate your understanding. However, she continued, her voice taking on a more assertive tone, I also want to be clear that I won't be sidelined because of my personal relationship with Nathan. My professional contributions stand on their own merits. I studied her carefully. There was steel beneath her polished exterior, a determination I hadn't fully appreciated yesterday. Ms. Winters, let me be absolutely clear. Your relationship with Mr. Davies has no bearing on how your professional contributions will be evaluated at Hartwick. The same standards apply to everyone. No advantages, no disadvantages based on personal connections. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this response. That's all I ask. Fair evaluation based on merit. Which brings me to my question, I continued. Why did you attempt to attend a meeting you weren't scheduled for? That suggests either poor understanding of corporate protocols or deliberate boundary testing. Her cheeks flushed slightly. Nathan suggested my input would be valuable. I trusted his judgment about the meeting structure. I see. I leaned forward slightly. A word of advice, Ms. Winters. At Hartwick, you'll be judged on your own decisions, not those made for you by others, regardless of your personal relationship with them. It would be unfortunate if that relationship undermined your professional standing. The message landed precisely as intended. Rebecca straightened, her expression hardening slightly. I understand completely, Ms. Chen. It won't happen again. Excellent. I smiled thinly. Was there anything else? She hesitated, clearly debating whether to say more. Just one thing. Nathan doesn't know I'm here. I'd prefer to keep it that way. Interesting. The engaged couple wasn't operating as a united front after all. That's your prerogative, I replied. Our professional interactions don't require his awareness or approval. Thank you. She stood, extending her hand across the desk. I look forward to contributing to Hartwick's success, Ms. Chen. I shook her hand briefly. As do I, Ms. Winters. Your reputation at Astoria speaks for itself. After she left, I sat back in my chair, considering the exchange. Rebecca Winters was more complex than I'd initially assessed. Ambitious, strategic, and unwilling to be defined by her relationship with Nathan. In another context, we might have been allies rather than awkward connections in this bizarre triangle. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Need to discuss marketing budget for Q3, available at 5? I typed back, schedule with Diane, I'm in meetings until 6. His response came quickly. Already tried. She said your calendar is blocked. This is time-sensitive for tomorrow's presentation. I sighed, recognizing the legitimate business need, despite suspecting an ulterior motive. Fine. 5:30 in conference room B. Bring the budget documents. The afternoon crawled by, each meeting feeling longer than the last as 5:30 approached. I found myself distracted by thoughts of Nathan and Rebecca, their relationship, their upcoming marriage, their place in my company. The professional and personal had become hopelessly entangled, despite my best efforts to keep them separate. At 5:25, I gathered my materials and headed to conference room B, determined to keep the meeting strictly business. Nathan was already there, spreadsheets and presentation slides arranged neatly on the table. Thank you for making time, he said as I entered, his tone professionally cordial. The marketing allocation needs your input before I finalize the presentation. Of course, I replied, taking a seat across from him rather than at the head of the table, a subtle choice to make this a peer discussion rather than a superior-subordinate interaction. Show me what you're thinking. For the next 20 minutes, we discussed budget allocations and marketing priorities with focused efficiency. Nathan's strategic thinking remained impressive. He had a natural instinct for market positioning and competitive differentiation that had served him well throughout his career. These projections are solid, I acknowledged as we wrapped up the discussion. With the adjustments we've outlined, I think you're ready for tomorrow's presentation. Good, he said, gathering his papers. Then, instead of leaving, he took a deep breath. Eliza, can we talk? Really talk? Not as CEO and VP, but as two people with history? I hesitated, professional instincts warring with personal curiosity. What about? Rebecca came to see you today, he said, surprising me. She thought I didn't know, but I saw her heading to your office. And I want to know what she said. What you said. This situation is complicated enough without secret. Meetings, I arched an eyebrow. Are you monitoring her movements, Nathan? That seems unhealthy for an engaged couple. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I'm not monitoring her. I was heading to a meeting and saw her enter your office area. It caught my attention because she hadn't mentioned planning to meet with you. Ms. Winters was concerned about being sidelined due to your relationship, I said. Deciding transparency was the simplest approach. I assured her that all executives at Hartwick are evaluated solely on their professional merits. That's it? That's the substance of it, yes. Nathan studied me for a moment, clearly trying to determine if I was withholding information. She's been unsettled since last night, he finally said, asking a lot of questions about our marriage, about how things ended. That's hardly surprising given the circumstances of our dinner, I replied. Finding out your fiancé chose his wedding anniversary to introduce you to his wife might prompt some reflection. He winced. It wasn't intentional, Eliza. I know you don't believe me, but it wasn't. Intention doesn't change impact, Nathan. No, he agreed quietly. It doesn't. A silence fell between us, heavy with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Hartwick employees hurrying to finish their day's work, unaware of the complicated history being negotiated in this small space. We never really talked about what happened, Nathan said finally, about why everything fell apart. This isn't the time or place for that conversation, I replied, glancing meaningfully at our surroundings. Then when? Where? You've made it clear that professional boundaries mean no personal discussions during work hours, but you've also ignored my attempts to communicate outside of work. Because there's nothing left to say, Nathan, I said, more sharply than I intended. You decided our marriage wasn't working. You moved out. You started seeing someone else. Now you're engaged. The narrative seems pretty straightforward to me. Is that really how you see it? That I just decided one day our marriage wasn't worth fighting for? I met his gaze directly. Isn't that what happened? You said you needed space to find yourself. Apparently that search led directly to Rebecca Winters. It wasn't that simple? And you know it, he countered. We were growing apart long before I moved out. Your career became everything. There was no room left for us. The accusation stung, partly because it carried a kernel of truth. I had thrown myself into work as our marriage deteriorated, seeking fulfillment where I could find it. My career became my focus because our partnership had become one-sided, I replied evenly. Every decision centered around your ambitions, your needs, your vision of success. When I stopped conforming to that vision, you checked out emotionally. That's not fair, Eliza. I supported your career. You supported a version of my career that fit neatly alongside yours, I corrected him. The moment my ambitions expanded beyond that carefully defined space, you became distant, critical. Nathan fell silent, his expression troubled. After a moment, he said, maybe there's some truth to that. I didn't see it that way at the time, but looking back, he trailed off, then met my gaze directly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For how things ended. For moving on too quickly. For the way you found out about Rebecca. The apology felt genuine, which only made it more difficult to process. I had been holding on to my anger like armor, protecting me from the pain of our failed marriage. His contrition threatened to crack that defense. I appreciate that, I said finally. But it doesn't change our current reality. You're engaged to someone else. I'm your CEO. We need to establish a new normal that acknowledges both those facts. He nodded slowly. You're right. Professional boundaries it is. He gathered his materials and stood. Thank you for the budget input. The presentation will be ready for tomorrow. As he reached the door, he paused, looking back at me. You were always destined for bigger things than I imagined, Eliza. I see that now. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone with spreadsheets, memories, and the complicated emotions his words had stirred. I remained in the conference room for several minutes, collecting my thoughts. Nathan's apology had been unexpected, his acknowledgement of his limitations in our marriage even more so. It offered a small measure of vindication, but also reopened wounds I'd thought were healing. The revelation about Rebecca seeking me out independently added another layer of complexity to the situation. She was clearly establishing her own boundaries and expectations, unwilling to be merely an extension of Nathan in this professional environment. As I gathered my materials to leave, I realized that navigating this triangle, professional, personal, and everything in between, would require more nuance than I had initially anticipated. My phone buzzed with a text from Miranda. Still on for wine and tie at 8? Absolutely, I replied. Make it a big glass. It's been quite a day. Walking back to my office, I passed Nathan and Rebecca in deep conversation by the elevators. They fell silent as I approached, both nodding professionally in greeting. The sigh. Moment was brief but loaded with unspoken complexity. 3 people bound together by circumstances none of us could have anticipated. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new boundaries to negotiate. For now, I would focus on getting through the day with my professional reputation intact and my personal equilibrium at least somewhat balanced. Wine with Miranda couldn't come soon enough. Miranda's apartment was a sanctuary of calm, minimalist, design, neutral colors, and an impressive view of downtown Chicago. She greeted me with a generous glass of red wine and containers of fragrant Thai food spread across her dining table. You look exhausted, she observed. That bad, huh? I sank into the chair with a sigh. It's been a day of boundaries, professional or personal. She filled her own glass and settled across from me. Both. The line between them is getting increasingly blurry. I took a long sip of wine. Rebecca Winters paid me an unscheduled visit today. Miranda's eyebrows shot up. The fiancé? Bold. Move. She wanted to make it clear that she won't be sidelined because of her relationship with Nathan. I pushed my fork through the pad thai. Then Nathan ambushed me with a budget discussion that turned into an attempt to rehash our marriage. And? He apologized, said he was sorry for how things ended, for moving on too quickly. I shook my head, still processing. He even admitted that maybe he didn't support my career the way he should have. Wow. Miranda looked genuinely surprised. That's unexpected self-awareness from a man who's usually so focused on his own narrative. The strangest part is that I think he meant it. Does it change anything? How you feel about the situation? I considered carefully. It doesn't change. The reality, he's engaged to someone else, we're getting divorced, and I'm his boss. But it does complicate the emotional landscape. Meaning? It's easier to maintain professional distance when I'm angry with him. This apology makes that harder. Miranda nodded. Anger is a useful shield until it isn't. She refilled our glasses. So what's your strategy going forward? Strict professional boundaries during work hours. Minimal personal contact otherwise. I sighed. Though that's challenging given how often work issues require our interaction. And Rebecca? She's clearly staking out her territory. She's actually quite impressive, I admitted. Ambitious, strategic, unwilling to be defined by her relationship with Nathan. In another life, we might have been friends. But not in this. One, Miranda concluded wryly. Definitely not in this one. I raised my glass in a mock toast. Here's to complicated professional dynamics and the women who navigate them. The next morning arrived with a fresh challenge. Nathan had emailed a request for a joint marketing PR presentation slot with Rebecca at the upcoming board meeting. A professional power play, positioning them as a strategic team seeking visibility with the board. After consulting with Howard, I approved a 15-minute slot with required advance review of materials. By noon, I received an unexpected delivery, a leather portfolio containing Nathan's complete marketing strategy for the Asian expansion. It was impressive, thorough, innovative, and aligned perfectly with my vision for Hartwick's global positioning. A professional olive branch that required no personal interaction to deliver. I sent a brief email acknowledging the excellent work with some minor suggestions, professional, specific, and appropriately distant. At 4:30, Miranda appeared at my door, her expression unusually serious. "You need to see this," she said, placing her tablet on my desk. On the screen was an internal message board thread titled, "Executive Changes and Rumors." Someone had posted photos of Nathan and me at Bellini's, along with speculation about our relationship and questions about potential conflicts of interest. "How bad is it?" I asked, scanning quickly. "Not catastrophic yet, but gaining traction," Miranda replied. "Mostly curiosity rather than criticism, but these things can escalate quickly." I drafted a brief statement acknowledging that Nathan and I were previously married, now separated, and that appropriate management structures had been implemented to avoid any conflict of interest. "Find out who posted those photos," I told Miranda. "I want to know if this was random gossip or something more targeted." My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Just saw the message board. Need to discuss response strategy." I replied, "Already." Handling it. Statement being drafted. Keep your response professional if asked directly. Shortly after our statement was posted, Nathan called again with disturbing news. Someone had updated the thread with information about the timeline, specifically, suggesting that he and Rebecca had started seeing each other before our separation was finalized. "How accurate is that information?" I asked. "Not entirely inaccurate," he admitted reluctantly, "but presented in the worst possible light." The next morning, Rebecca requested a 7:30 a.m. meeting. I arrived early, preparing for whatever uncomfortable conversation awaited. Rebecca entered my office perfectly composed in a tailored navy suit. "Thank you for meeting me so early. I appreciate your discretion." "Of course. What can I do for you?" She placed her tablet on the desk. "I assume you've seen the message board thread?" "Yes. The company has issued a statement addressing the management structure." "The post suggesting that Nathan and I began our relationship before his separation from you, it's problematic." Her voice remained steady. "From a company perspective, it suggests ethical lapses. From a personal perspective, it paints you as the other woman," I finished. "Exactly." Her blue eyes met mine directly. "Which is not how I view myself or how I want to be viewed by my new colleagues." "What exactly are you asking for?" "Clarity. I need to understand the timeline from your perspective, and I need to know if you're behind these posts." The accusation surprised me. "You think I'm responsible?" "It's a logical conclusion. You have the most to gain from undermining our credibility before the board presentation. I can assure you that I had nothing to do with those posts. Furthermore, They don't serve my interests in any way. The success of Hartwick includes the success of all executive team members, yourself and Nathan included. She studied my face, then nodded slowly. Then we have a mutual problem. Someone is attempting to create division within the executive team at a critical juncture. Miranda is investigating the source. Rebecca hesitated. There's something else you should know. The timeline in those posts, it's not entirely accurate, but it's not entirely false either. I waited as she continued. Nathan and I met at a conference 4 months ago. He told me he was separated, that his marriage was effectively over. We didn't begin dating immediately, but there was interest. The timeline aligned with what I had suspected. Nathan had moved out 5 months ago, claiming he needed space. Apparently, that space had immediately been filled by Rebecca. I want you to hear it from me directly, she continued. And I want to clarify that I never knowingly pursued a married man. By the time our relationship became serious, Nathan had already moved out and initiated divorce proceedings. The distinction seemed important to her, that she wasn't a homewrecker, that there was a clear line between the end of one relationship and the beginning of another. Thank you for your honesty, I said. I appreciate the direct communication. There's one more thing. The board presentation next week, Nathan and I have worked incredibly hard on it. I'd hate to see it undermined by personal complications. If you're asking whether I'll evaluate your work fairly despite our personal connection, the answer is yes. At Hartwick, everyone is judged solely on their professional merits. She nodded, visibly relieved. As she gathered her things to leave, I found myself asking one more question. The engagement, it seems rather accelerated. 4 months of dating to a lifetime commitment is quite a leap. Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, perhaps, quickly masked. When you know, she said, the phrase sounding rehearsed. Then, more genuinely, Nathan is persuasive. When he wants something, he pursues it wholeheartedly. I knew that quality well. Yes, I agreed quietly. He is that. She studied me for a moment. Was it the same with you? In the beginning? Yes, I admitted. Very similar. Rebecca nodded, absorbing this information. Then, shifting back to her professional demeanor, she thanked me for my time and left. After she departed, I received a text from Miranda. Found something on the message board poster. My office when you're free. In Miranda's office, she showed me her laptop. The original post came from an account created just 2 days ago. I traced the IP address. It's coming from within Hartwick Tower, specifically the executive floor. Someone on our executive team is stirring up gossip about Nathan. And me? Not necessarily the executive team itself, Miranda clarified. About 30 people have regular access to the executive floor. Can you determine exactly which computer it came from? She shook her head. Not without a more invasive investigation, which would require board approval. Keep monitoring the situation discreetly for now, I decided. As I returned to my office, I found Nathan waiting outside, his expression tense. Rebecca told me about your meeting. I wanted to make sure we're on the same page about the board presentation. Once, inside with the door closed, I reassured him the presentation would proceed as scheduled, with work evaluated on its merits, separate from personal complications. About the message board posts, he began. Miranda is investigating, I interrupted. The posts originated from the executive floor, but we haven't identified the specific source yet. Nathan's expression darkened. Someone's trying to sabotage us before the board presentation. Possibly. Or someone simply enjoys office gossip. You don't believe that any more than I do, he said. This is targeted. The question is, who benefits from undermining our credibility with the board? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. The board chairman wanted to discuss the message board situation immediately. I need to take this, I said. We'll continue later. After Nathan left, I took the call from Richard Taylor, who informed me several board members had seen the posts and were concerned about leadership conflicts during the acquisition period. He requested I address the situation directly at the beginning of next week's board meeting. Just as I hung up, Miranda burst into my office, her expression urgent. "I know who posted the messages," she said without preamble, "and you're not going to believe it." The day of the board meeting arrived with perfect spring weather, clear skies and mild temperatures unusual for Chicago in March. I had arrived early to review my presentation and prepare mentally for addressing the message board situation. The boardroom slowly filled with members, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern as they greeted me. Nathan and Rebecca arrived together, both immaculately dressed and professionally composed despite the tension evident in their postures. Richard Taylor called the meeting to order promptly at 9 a.m. "Before we begin our regular agenda, I believe Ms. Chen has some matters to address regarding recent internal communications." All eyes turned to me as I stood, smoothing my suit jacket. "Thank you, Richard. As most of you are aware, there have been discussions on our internal platforms regarding personal relationships among the executive team. I'd like to address these directly and transparently." I outlined the situation succinctly: my prior marriage to Nathan, our current separation, and the management structures implemented to avoid conflicts of interest. The board members listened attentively, some taking notes. "What concerns us," said board member Eleanor Winters, "is not the relationship itself, but the timing of these revelations and their potential impact on the Astoria acquisition." I nodded acknowledgement. "A valid concern, which is why I've asked our chief legal officer to join us today with some relevant information." On cue, Miranda entered the boardroom, carrying a tablet and a small folder of documents. She took a position beside me at the head of the table. "Good morning," she began. "As part of our investigation into the source of the message board posts, we conducted a thorough digital forensic analysis. What we discovered was unexpected." Rebecca shifted slightly in her seat, a barely perceptible movement that caught my attention. Beside her, Nathan remained perfectly still, his expression professionally neutral, though his eyes betrayed tension. "The posts originated from a device registered to Peterson Reynolds," Miranda continued, referring to a senior board member of Astoria Digital who had been excluded from the acquisition negotiations. However, the device was physically located within our executive floor at the time of posting. Murmurs spread around the table as board members processed this information. "We've confirmed through security footage and badge access records that Mr. Reynolds was not personally in the building at those times," Miranda explained, "which means someone with access to our executive floor was using his credentials or device to post the messages." I watched Rebecca carefully as Miranda spoke. Her composure remained intact, but something in her eyes had changed, a flicker of calculation, perhaps, or resignation. "After further investigation," Miranda continued, "we discovered that the device in question was linked to an email account used to communicate with Ms. Rebecca Winters in the weeks leading up to the acquisition." Announcement. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Rebecca, whose perfect posture now seemed rigid rather than poised. Nathan turned to her, confusion evident on his face. "Rebecca, what's she talking about?" Rebecca maintained her composure admirably, though her voice had a slight edge when she spoke. "I believe Ms. Wilson is suggesting I had something to do with the message board posts. That's absurd." "Not suggesting," Miranda corrected. "We have conclusive evidence." She placed several documents on the table. Email exchanges between Ms. Winters and Mr. Reynolds discussing strategies to delay or disrupt the acquisition. The message board posts were designed to create leadership conflict at a critical juncture. Nathan stared at Rebecca in disbelief. "Is this true?" Rebecca's professional mask finally cracked, frustration bleeding through. "Peterson and I developed Astoria's brand from nothing. This acquisition would erase our work, fold it into Hartwick's corporate identity. We were being sidelined." So you invented a scandalized love triangle to derail it? Nathan's voice was incredulous. I used what was available, Rebecca replied coolly. Your marital situation was conveniently dramatic. I simply amplified existing tensions. Understanding dawned on Nathan's face. The engagement? That was part of this too? Another strategic move? Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Richard Taylor cleared his throat. Ms. Winters, I believe your services will no longer be required at Hartwick. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. As Rebecca was led from the room, the stunned silence gave way to urgent discussions about damage control and next steps for the acquisition. Nathan sat motionless, processing the betrayal. I caught Miranda's eye across the table, her slight nod confirming what we'd discussed privately. The evidence against Rebecca had been gathered legally and ethically, but the revelation had been strategically timed to minimize disruption to Hartwick while neutralizing the threat to our acquisition plans. When the meeting adjourned 2 hours later, Nathan remained in his seat as others filed out. I lingered behind, sensing he needed to talk. I didn't see it, he said quietly when we were alone. She played me completely. She's very good at what she does, I acknowledged. Her marketing and PR skills are exceptional. She simply applied them unethically. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. I asked her to marry me. I thought... He trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief. For what it's worth, I think part of her feelings for you were genuine, I offered. People are rarely all calculation or all emotion. He looked up at me, his expression more vulnerable than I'd seen in years. I owe you an apology, Eliza. A real one. Not the half-efforts I've made since finding out you're CEO. You don't owe me anything, Nathan. I do. I left our marriage because your success threatened me. I couldn't handle the idea that you might outpace me professionally. He met my gaze directly. Then I immediately attached myself to someone who seemed content to exist in my shadow. The irony isn't lost on me. The honesty was unexpected and, I had to admit, somewhat healing. We both made mistakes, I acknowledged. The difference is that I channeled my pain into professional growth while you sought validation elsewhere. He nodded slowly. And now you're my boss. The universe has a sense of humor. Indeed it does. I gathered my materials, preparing to leave. What will you do now? Professionally, focus on making the Astoria integration successful, he replied. Personally, he shrugged. Start over, I suppose. Alone this time. Figure out who I am without defining myself through someone else's eyes. That sounds like growth. I learned from the best. He offered a small, genuine smile. You always were the stronger one. Not stronger, I corrected him, just more comfortable with my own ambition. As I walked toward the door, Nathan called after me. Eliza, do you think, in another life, if I'd been different? I turned back, considering the question. We can't live in hypotheticals, Nathan, but I think we both needed to become different people, whether together or apart. He nodded, accepting the gentle closure I'd offered. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You're going to be an exceptional CEO. Thank you. And you're an exceptional marketing executive. Hartwick is fortunate to have your talents. As I walked back to my office, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in months. The boundaries between personal and professional would remain complex for a while longer, but the sharpest edges had been smoothed. Nathan would continue as VP of marketing, reporting through Howard to maintain appropriate management structure. Our past would remain just that, past. Miranda was waiting in my office, a question in her eyes. How did it go with Nathan? Better than expected. I think we've reached, if not closure, at least a mutual understanding. And professionally. He stays. He's too valuable to lose, especially now that we need to rebuild the PR division without Rebecca. Miranda nodded approvingly. The board was impressed with how you handled everything. Richard mentioned privately that they're more confident than ever in your leadership. I smiled, settling behind my desk. Good. Because we have an acquisition to complete and a company to build. Any regrets? Miranda asked, her tone softening slightly. I gazed out at the Chicago skyline, considering the question. Not regrets, just appreciation for the journey that brought me here. Even the painful parts. After Miranda left, I turned my chair toward the window, watching clouds drift across the spring sky. In less than a week, my personal and professional worlds had collided spectacularly, revealing truths I might have otherwise never confronted. Nathan had been forced to recognize his pattern of seeking partners who existed in his shadow. I had been compelled to navigate the complex intersection of power, history, and professional boundaries. And Rebecca, brilliant, calculating Rebecca, had overplayed her hand, revealing the danger of underestimating those you seek to manipulate. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Still on for the marketing presentation tomorrow? I replied. Simply, yes. 10 a.m. Bring the revised Asian market projections. Professional. Boundary appropriate. The new normal. Setting down my phone, I turned back to my computer and opened the quarterly projections that needed my review. The past would always be there, but it was the future that demanded my attention now. A future I had built through determination, resilience, and the uncomfortable growth that comes from facing painful truths. As CEO of Hartwick International, I was ready for whatever challenges came next. And as Eliza Chen, I was finally completely free from living in anyone's shadow but my own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.